Rob, you are looking super smart. I am actually in complete fitness gear, but I have done nothing today.
New jacket.
I know, you're
New jacket.
looking very suave. You in Manchester?
Summary in Manchester, yeah.
Nice.
On programme with our sports directors today and then CEOs tomorrow.
Good stuff. Well, it's been another busy few weeks of sport since we last spoke. Rob, we had the Netball Super League final in London at the O2 this weekend, which by all accounts was a sold out affair, and it's been a great season for netball. I guess the interesting thing, when the Netball Super League 2.0 was announced, there was a lot of controversy. There were a lot of people involved in the sport and a lot of people involved in teams like the Surrey Storm, and it really kind of threw everything up in the air, didn't it? But I think, would you agree that Netball Super League 2.0 has shown that to progress you sometimes have to make unpopular decisions?
Well, tough decisions, and decisions that are in the best interest of the strategic development of a sport. And contrary to popular belief, that isn't always expansion and paying people lots of money. That happens to be getting your fundamentals right. And I think where Claire Nelson and Mark Foster and the commercial team have probably got this right, I'm going to stop short of saying it was a triumph, because I still think there are a few things they need to iron out. But the Super League 2.0 has certainly been an improvement on what had gone before. Got some fabulous netball getting played. I'm a little bit biased because I am a netball dad. My daughter playing for Nottingham Forest, we have this kind of general allegiance to Forest, who were really exciting actually this year. But what I noticed when I went to watch was the fact that the stadia or the arenas that they're playing in are generally full, but the kind of additional events is almost akin to what you see in America. So there's stuff outside the venue. There's access to players for autographs and photos, and they make a real fuss about the crowd and the demographics in the crowd. And I think that is a direction of travel that is very clearly strategic from Netball Super League, and something that is really going to entice fans and maintain them. And certainly on the basis of what I saw at the Motorpoint Arena in Nottingham, a hugely successful sports franchise. And then at the Copper Box at the weekend, a fabulous game of netball between the two giants of Loughborough Lightning and London Pulse, with a 16-year-old playing centre for London Pulse who's just a year older than Sophie.
And that is indicative, I think, of netball's popularity. With young girls, it's hugely popular. With back to netball's proved an absolute game changer for so many people in this country. It's one of those sports, isn't it, that's got huge headroom for growth.
Massive, yeah. You're only really restricted by the number of courts that you've got available, and most towns have got the odd sports hall kicking around. That back to netball programme, the adult netball leagues, the development of the club structure, I think is fiercely important in the context of the Super League, but also so to the franchises and the player development pathways that they're putting on. So, without turning this into a fanfare for Nottingham Forest netball, what I've seen they've done is set up roots programs, so they're really embedded in communities. They're doing work with schools. They've obviously got their elite player performance pathways, of which they try and retain a lot of talent to as well. And all of that feeds up to young girls wanting to go and watch high quality netball on the court on a Friday, Saturday or Sunday, and critically paying for the opportunity to do that. And the crowd demographics are much more family oriented. Of course, it's what we hear with women's football to a certain extent. But what I'm seeing in netball is something that is really emotional and is really generating that fan attachment. And again, they've been quite smart at Forest, utilising their football crowd and making sure they can sell tickets into the Forest netball as well, which has been really successful. And whilst there were some casualties, Bath being the biggest one, I think for women to be able to play in those arenas and demonstrate the high skill acquisition and the speed of the game and the fierce competition that's also at play, I think it's really important for the growth of the game. And I think what we'll start to see, Netball Super League 3.0 perhaps, is a steady then expansion into some of those other heartlands in the UK once you've got the fundamentals right, and I think they're certainly on the road to doing that.
Yeah, and I think probably what this season has also proved is, like you say, the league will expand, but there are certain advantages to having smaller leagues, more concentrated matches. You're not playing a huge number of matches, but every match is a massive event all of a sudden.
Yeah, fiercely competitive as well. So you had teams that were taking points off each other. That meant that going into those last 2 or 3 fixtures, there were still teams that could compete and finish in the playoff positions, and they were still jostling for position within the league. So that you didn't have this over-dominance from some of the teams within the division. I think that came from having a slightly restricted structure, and naturally is going to increase and improve competitive balance. And ultimately, that's what people pay their money for, to put the bum on a seat and watch a game of netball. Or any sport for that. So.
It's kind of boomeranged between sublime, ridiculous, back to sublime, and then a little bit of ridiculous. Now a little, massive dose of sadness as well with the injury to Jamal Musiala. One of Bayern Munich's best players, one of Germany's best players, and a player that everyone will be hoping will still be watching at next year's World Cup. It's interesting, looking at the players in the FIFA Club World Cup, but also looking at the stance taken by someone like Christian Pulisic, who said to the USA that he didn't want to play in this year's Gold Cup, which USA lost at the weekend to Mexico, because he played 50 matches for the past 2 seasons for AC Milan. It's the biggest summer in US soccer history, or certainly since 1994 next year, and he wants to make sure that he's fresh. So you've got some players taking a stance and saying, no, I'm not playing in what is a huge tournament, and then you've got other players probably haven't been given that much choice as to whether they want to be involved in the FIFA Club World Cup, but and Musiala's, these things happen in football, don't they? I'm not saying that Donnarumma did that on purpose. I think he's come out and said how sorry he is the way that everything ended, but you are seeing certain players taking a stand, and you wonder whether more players will quite rightly say that enough's enough. How many games do you want me to play in the season?
It's a really tricky balance, isn't it? Look, Musiala aside, that was a freak accident. That's nothing to do with player load, in my opinion. That could have happened on the first day of the season in domestic competition. It could have happened in a European Champions League final. It's just really unfortunate that it happened at all, and really unfortunate it happened at the Club World Cup. You have this really uneasy tension, though, don't you? That clubs are persistently requested to go into player negotiation, pay big transfer fees, pay decent money on player wages. That money has to be generated from something, and a lot of the time that something is through broadcast media rights, commercial revenue, and fan revenue, and ultimately football is the product, and playing that game is what people pay to consume. So at some point you have to have a trade-off. If we want to see fewer games being played, then naturally player transfer fees and player wages will have to drop in line with those earning capacity, much like a conversation we just had at a completely opposite end of the spectrum. Netball Super League players do not get paid anything like the sorts of monies that even League 2 footballers get paid, and that's because this sport is embryonic and it has got a much smaller commercial footprint. So you have to understand the equation. Number of games played equals more money in a player pocket, and that might sound really binary given the calls for player welfare and player loading, but it's the stark reality. If players want to keep earning vast sums of money, then they will ultimately have to play more games, or we can readjust the salary base and reduce the number of games accordingly, because where I do agree is they probably are playing too much, and at some point we will get oversaturated as well with football content, which we probably will do next year in the Premier League with however many games it is that are being broadcast on Sky Television.
Yeah, and looking at the FIFA Club World Cup in the round, Rob, I mean, some clubs have made an enormous amount of money out of it. Munich have done pretty well out of it. PSG, the money that you're going to make if you actually win it, I think it's something like £91 million, isn't it, that the winner's going to take home. So from a club point of view, there's a lot of clubs that quids in, but from FIFA's point of view, it's hard to see that this has been anything other than a commercial disaster, isn't it?
They'll have to look at their P&L at the end of the tournament. The prize money is hugely valuable to all of the teams that participated, even some of those smaller ones. I think we talked about it previously, didn't we? Yeah. Teams like the Uruguay Reds will, probably increase their turnover by at least a factor of 10 as a consequence of their participation in the Club World Cup. And similarly, for a team like PSG, for Chelsea, for a Manchester City, it can be the difference between making sure that your FSR payments, or rather FSR calculations with regard to UEFA regulations, or the PSR calculations that we talk about in the Premier League are satisfactory because of the amount of money that you've got going in. So back to that equation, Rich, it's, if you want the money going in, the money will come back out the other side of that. And FIFA have got a responsibility to grow the game, to expand the footprint of the game, and I think that's what they probably tried to do in their own special way over in the States, and will continue to build on that moderate progress.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to see how many people are at the final.
It'll be full, I reckon, and there'll be a load of secondary market stuff going on, and I think they will find that as the tournament continues and those bigger household names sort of get towards those latter stages of competition, the crowds will start to swell, as you would expect with any major tournament that have got the haves and the have-nots participating with each other at the very start.
He's got visions of Infantino texting every single distant relative he's got in the US.
Oh, we'll dig them all out, I'm sure. Bit salty, yeah.
Just finally, Rob, we're putting a piece up on our Substack on IPL valuations 2025. I think the league itself, the business value of the league has increased by 13% again this year. The brand value has increased. The value of every single franchise has also gone up. That is a league, and it still, it's massively successful. But if you take it and you look at the valuation of those franchises in comparison to, NFL franchises like the Dallas Cowboys, which I think is worth over 10 billion. I think it was the first sports organisation to be valued at over 10 billion. It's still a fraction of that. But the IPL is a league that does things right. They are making enormous amounts of money. Viewing figures are through the roof this year. I think it was something like 678 million views at one point in the IPL final between RCB and the Punjab Kings. There'll be a lot of not just cricket organisations but sports organisations around the world that will be looking at the way the IPL operate.
That's mega, isn't it? And if you just take those valuations that you just talked through, you're comparing a US sports franchise that has been built in order to increase its franchise value over time to the point at which it is now, versus a relatively new competition that is trading currently on volume. So the volume of people trying to consume the IPL is what's generating its real value. So you start to put on real strategic thought with those IPL teams, and I'm not saying for 1 minute that they don't currently have some really good strategic brains in there, by the way, but you start to layer up that maturity of sector, that strategic development of the consumer and providing those engagement opportunities. The IPL is in the infancy of its commercial valuation, and over the next decade we will see it outstrip many of those household franchise names that you and I could probably rattle off from the States, or indeed clubs in the Premier League that are playing. The IPL will become synonymous with top level commercial valuation in sport without a doubt.
Yeah, and it's not unreasonable to suggest, is it, that with so many of the owners that are going to be involved in the 100 also being involved in the IPL, that there's going to be a huge amount of innovation coming the way of English cricket. These guys aren't here to play by the normal rules, are they? They're here to make as much money as they possibly can and to increase the valuation.
Yeah, and you do that by extending your footprint. Yeah, you do that by extending your footprint and generating that brand alignment, don't you? I think the English game is ripe for that investment. The IPL have seen a huge amount of opportunity there. Something we'll probably discuss next week, Rich, at the Lineker's finance report launch, because that investment is going to do some wondrous things, I think, for English cricket. Again, if managed strategically and appropriately, I think it'd be really powerful.
Excellent. Well, if you're looking for an outfit to wear to that event, which is at the Oval, I believe, on Tuesday, Rob, then I'd go with what you're wearing. It says to me, I'm not sure what it says to me actually, summer style. That's what it says to me.
You haven't seen shorts.
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be here in my running stuff, having not run over the past week. But also, looking forward to speaking to Plymouth owner Simon Hallett next week as well, which should be good. I think he's in the States. He'll have some interesting things to say. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that one as well. But thank you very much, Rob. Nice to speak to you.
You too, mate. Take it easy.